Jotaro sat at the table while the old man talked on the phone in the other room.
Yes, I know it's early. Just get me connected with your information specialist.
It was early in the morning. His mom and grandma were both asleep. He had a cup of coffee in front of him, but he didn't have the stomach for it at the moment. He only stirred it listlessly, his bad arm stiff like it usually was in the morning. The old man was right. Susie Q was not happy when Joseph dropped the news that they were going to be staying in Japan for an undetermined amount of time due to a work emergency. She seemed to calm down when Jotaro said that he would be helping with it. Joseph offered to let her fly home to America on her own, but she would hear nothing of it, saying that if Joseph was going to stay, then she would as well. The last couple days had been hard for them all. They still had no leads on the vampire's whereabouts, and Joseph was calling the Speedwagon Foundation almost every hour trying to get any police intel they had. He had shaken Jotaro awake this morning, insisting he get out of bed due to a potential new lead, which was why Jotaro had tolerated it rather than punching the old man's lights out with Star Platinum. The conversation in the other room went quiet as someone on the phone talked with his grandfather. Jotaro only half listened, lost in his own thoughts. They had been able to repair the grave quickly thanks to some old connection his grandfather had in the town. They hadn't been back to see it, though. Jotaro didn't know if he even wanted to. He was still bothered by the coffin lid and the fact that Kakuin's corpse was missing. This vampire had to be a Stan user. There was just no way he wasn't. And whatever his ability was, it couldn't be pretty. He knew he had to be ready for anything, though. The enemy wouldn't hold back, so he couldn't either. He clenched his fist in anticipation like he'd be attacked at any moment. The old man suddenly spoke up.
Thank you. I'll call back soon.
He hung up, the phone clicking loudly on the receiver. He came into the kitchen, a grim look on his face.
Well?
The vampire struck again.
What?
Early this morning, there was an accident outside S City. 2 cars collided. When the police got there, one of the victims was dead, with his body drained.
Jotaro ground his teeth together. The old man didn't seem to notice, and kept talking.
Of course, he was long gone by the time they got there. The police wrote off his wounds as some form of extreme exsanguination. But when the Speedwagon Foundation came to investigate, they recognized it as marks of a vampire.
Anything else?
No, but now I'm sure this vampire is headed towards us. First Morio, now this. He's clearly coming to where we are.
Jotaro looked away, as if the vampire was waiting out the window for him.
We can't let him come here. That'll put Grandma and my mother in danger.
Exactly. So we'll have to find him first. Now that we know where he's heading, it'll be easier to cut him off.
Suddenly, Jotaro had an idea.
We could use Hermit Purple to see where he'll go next, then lay a trap for him there.
Oh, that's a great idea, Jotaro.
Joseph went off into the other room. Joseph's stand, Hermit Purple, had the ability to capture faraway visions in a visual form. His favorite use of this ability was to take pictures of things that were far away and place them on a film. He had done this with a photo he had taken of Dio, which was how they were able to identify that he was in Egypt. When Joseph came back into the room, he was carrying 2 cameras, one in each hand. He set them down on the table. He'd gone out to buy them yesterday, in case he had to use them to find the vampire.
I'll use this first one to get a picture of where we can lay a trap for him.
Joseph placed the camera on the table and stepped back. Jotaro stood up and stepped back as well, getting ready to avoid the blast. Joseph exhaled, and a high-pitched, otherworldly ringing sound reverberated as his stand was summoned. Thorny vines manifested out of Joseph's hand and wrapped themselves around, circling up his wrist. They were a deep purple color, rippling with energy. Joseph slammed his thorn-covered hand down on the camera, smashing it loudly. Pieces of metal and melted plastics blasted around the room. The ruined camera printed a picture as it was destroyed, humming with Hermit Purple's energy, then was still. Joseph dismissed his stand and gingerly pulled the picture out of the broken camera pieces. He put it on the table, waiting for the film to develop. Jotaro came over to get a better view of the picture. The color slowly came into it as it developed. Not a word passed between them as they stared, waiting for it to appear. After a couple of minutes, a blurry image on the film began to come into focus. Jotaro found himself holding his breath as the picture revealed itself. It showed an old, dilapidated warehouse. The picture was taken from a bird's-eye view, showing the surrounding landscape. The warehouse was by other abandoned storage sheds. The glass on the windows was broken, and the cement was cracked, overgrown with weeds. They studied the picture for a while, then Joseph spoke up.
So, this is where he'll go next.
He looked a bit longer.
There's the city's skyline in the distance.
He pointed his gloved finger on the horizon in the photo, confirming this warehouse wasn't too far away.
I recognize this place. I used to pass it by as a kid all the time. It's not too far from here.
Oh, that's perfect then. Let's go then. We haven't a moment to lose.
Wait, old man. Let's use the other camera to get a picture of the vampire. That way we'll recognize him when we see him.
Oh, yes, that's a great idea.
Joseph swept the other camera's remains off the table into the garbage. He placed the new one down and repeated the process of summoning his stand and destroying it. The new photo emerged just as the other one had. Jotaro was much more interested in this image. He stared at it the entire time it developed, desperate to put a face to the monster they were hunting. The only way he could tell the picture was finished was that the color stopped contrasting. He and Joseph stared intently, waiting, studying, but the picture didn't show much. The vampire was clearly sitting in the dark, hence the bad lighting. What little light there was showed the dim inside of some kind of metal box. They could faintly see someone curled up in the corner in the fetal position, their back to the camera.
Is that him?
Joseph's brow furrowed as he leaned closer.
What the hell is this? I can't see anything.
He ran a gloved hand through his hair, exasperated. Jotaro stared, even using Star Platinum's vision to try to discern anything. He still couldn't make it out. The picture was too dark and the vampire's face was completely hidden in the corner of the box.
I can't make anything out either.
What a waste. Well, either way, we need to get to that warehouse before he does. Get ready to leave soon.
Joseph headed off to the other room, picking up the phone again. Jotaro slowly stood up, heading off to his own room to shower and get dressed, trying to ignore his disappointment at not getting to see the vampire's face. He'd just have to wait to see him in person, right before he killed him. Kakuin's eyes flew open. He was greeted by the sight of the dumpster wall slick with grime. A horde of flies had descended on him, rubbing their wicked claws together and fluttering iridescent wings. He sat up and immediately they dispersed, their humming echoing around the metal chamber. He was covered in grime from laying on the dumpster floor, but that wasn't what bothered him. His flesh had erupted in goosebumps and his heart was pounding. Someone had been watching him before he woke up. He could sense it. He turned his head and peered at the little line of light where the dumpster lid met the rim, but all he could see was the yellowish light from the street lamp. He sniffed deeply, trying to detect if anyone was nearby, but all he got was a nose full of dumpster rot. He coughed, the sound reverberating around him. He sighed and rubbed his eyes. He was being crazy. If anyone had been close or tried to look in the dumpster, he would have heard them. He must have imagined it. He looked at the light line once more just to make sure. He exhaled slowly, scanning the narrow sliver of light beneath the lid. No shadow moved across it. No sign of an intruder. Just the dull yellow of the street lamp. Wait, a street lamp? His mind clicked into place. That meant the sun had set. He could move again. Immediately he burst upwards, flapping the dumpster lid back with a loud crack. He put his hands on the rim and hoisted himself out, allowing the fresh air to clean out his airways. It was like taking the first breath after being drowned. The pure relief of being out of the horrid stench was enough to make him giddy. As he stretched his stiff muscles, he considered what his next move would be from here. He couldn't keep going around in his burial clothes, wandering the streets like a vagabond. If they had been bad before, they were even worse now that he had spent the day in a dumpster. There wasn't almost a speck of white left anywhere on them. Every inch of his body was spattered with mud and grime. That was clearly attracting too much attention. He'd have to get himself clean and find some new clothes to wear.
Still no money, though,
he thought to himself. That meant he'd have to steal. Though after all he'd been through and done in the past few days, a little shoplifting felt pretty tame. He followed the alleyway around the building back to the main street and poked his head out. The sky still had some faint light, confirming the sun had only recently set. The street wasn't too busy, people passing by here and there. Kakuin bit his tongue, trying to distract himself from the scent. He glanced further up the street and saw a department store.
Perfect. I hope this goes well.
Making sure no one was in sight, he made his way up the street, sticking to the shadows. Jotaro's breath frosted in front of him as they approached the warehouse. It was deathly cold this evening. He pulled his coat tighter around him, determined not to shiver and cause his broken arm unnecessary pain. The old man walked ahead of him, scouting out the area. He made sure to check the nearby storage sheds, making sure there weren't any squatters. They had found the warehouse pretty quickly. Jotaro recognized the path once they started getting closer. The building looked just as decrepit in real life as it did in the photo. It was 2 stories tall, looming over them ominously. The cracked windows led into darkness, and a portion of the wall was covered in ivy. The woods dotted the surrounding landscape, and the only noise was the faint sound of cars making their evening commute back on the main road about a kilometer away. They were effectively isolated out here.
Is there really no one here? This place can't be totally abandoned.
It's been like this for as long as I can remember. Something about the place being haunted keeps most people away.
Oh, please. Haunted? What is this, a campfire story?
It's all just rumors.
Jotaro furrowed his brow as he tried to remember the details.
We say someone died here. Some kind of accident, I think. Anyway, the place has been abandoned for years. No one wants anything to do with it, not with its reputation.
Oh, the Japanese are so superstitious. We are probably the scariest things here, honestly. But if it is abandoned like this, and the vampire needs a place to hide during the day while he travels, this would be the ideal location.
So, what's the plan? We just wait to ambush him?
Not quite. I'm certain he's a stand user, and we don't know anything about what his stand can do. Blindly attacking him could end very badly.
They reached the doors of the warehouse. Joseph tentatively pushed on them. They squealed loudly on their hinges, and a wave of dusty scent hit Jotaro's nose. His grandfather pushed the door all the way open. The inside of the warehouse was dark, save for the bits of sunlight streaming in from the broken windows. Apart from a few abandoned crates and strewn tarps, the wide-open floor was empty. Jotaro saw a frozen puddle in one of the corners, an icicle dangling above it from a crack in the ceiling. The only sound came from his own breathing, his breath still misting in front of him.
Creepy.
Jotaro mumbled once they had surveyed the building.
So, what do you have in mind then?
A mischievous look came on Joseph's face, contrasting the dreary setting. Jotaro grimaced.
I've got an idea, and it involves the Speedwagon Foundation. I called them earlier, so they should be on their way here soon.
They're coming here? How are they supposed to help us?
Well, Jotaro, let's just say the Speedwagon Foundation isn't only a medical research charity. They've got all kinds of tricks hidden up their sleeves, and a plethora of weapons at their disposal.
Uh-huh.
That was all Jotaro could say before the old man turned back and started walking toward the road they had come from. He turned as well and started walking. Whatever was coming, it had better work, because if this vampire was as dangerous as they thought, they might not get a second chance. Kakyoin pulled his trench coat tighter around him, not because he was cold, but because the sun was starting to rise. He wanted to protect his bare skin from exposure. He noticed that as a vampire, the elements didn't really bother him as much. He could feel it was cold, but it didn't make him want to shiver or go somewhere warmer. His skin seemed to simply adapt to the cold, cooling to the same temperature so he could keep going forward. The previous night had gone by uneventfully, which helped him feel a lot better about his situation. He had sent Hierophant into the store to grab new clothes, and he'd been able to move in and out undetected. He'd found an apartment that the owners were currently gone from. The door had been locked, but of course with his stand it wasn't a problem. Hierophant's coils easily slipped underneath the door and opened it from the other side. He'd showered and changed, throwing away his burial clothes in the same dumpster he'd spent the day in after he'd left, locking the door behind him. He felt disgusted about the whole situation, but he ignored that and just tried to focus on his mission. He kept the brim of his new hat low, trying to avoid the gaze of anyone he passed. Once he'd made it through the city out into the suburbs, his throat burned so bad he thought he was going to pass out, as if his body was angry at him for passing up so many humans. He quickly ran to the woods in search of animals. An owl from a tree and a doe had helped to satiate him. He resumed his trek after that, still keeping an eye out for any animals he saw. He decided to speed up the journey by running, now that he knew how fast he could go from his encounter with the police. It felt much better than the slow trudge he had been doing before. He was now passing through some woods. Keeping his direction, he knew that he was getting close to Jotaro. Tokyo had to be up ahead. Excitement at the possibilities ahead kept him feeling a lot more optimistic than he had the past few days, but he tried to keep his expectations low at the same time. He didn't even know if Jotaro would be there, or if he was still alive. But still, the thought of making any progress on his journey excited him. Once he got answers, then he could move forward. And then... he actually hadn't given much thought to that. Once all of this was over, what would he do? Just go home?
No. I can never go back there. Not like this. Then what's left for me?
His thoughts were interrupted by the trees thinning. He stepped out into an open field and gasped at what he saw. In the distance, he could see the city skyline of Tokyo. The lights were glittering, winking at him in the distance. His heart soared. He was so close. He almost started running, but then he noticed something else. The light was growing on the horizon. The sun hadn't appeared yet, but he knew it wouldn't be long before it showed itself. He'd have to stop for now. He looked around him. He could try hiding in the trees, but that wouldn't protect him forever once the sun was overhead, shining through the leaves. He looked up ahead. He could see there were some buildings in the distance. Maybe he could try going there. He started walking at a fast pace, hoping to get there before the sun.
Target spotted. He's approaching.
Jotaro felt his heartbeat spike as he heard those words. Joseph pulled out the walkie-talkie and pressed the button.
Copy that. Everyone, get in position!
The Speedwagon Foundation workers dispersed on Joseph's command. The old man hadn't been lying. The Speedwagon Foundation was much more than he thought it was. They'd come soon after the old man had said they would, armed with all kinds of equipment for capturing a vampire. They spent almost the whole night preparing for his arrival. Jotaro had only been able to get a little sleep in one of the cars they'd brought. They'd been so busy securing the area, getting a lookout system ready, and preparing the trap. They had men stationed nearly a kilometer out, and many more ready inside the warehouse with guns and light cannons. Jotaro and the old man had agreed they didn't want to kill the vampire immediately. They wanted answers, but if he refused to give them and things turned ugly, they'd have no choice. Now, it sounded like he'd been spotted, and was heading to the warehouse to camp out for the day, just like Hermit Purple had shown them. He and the old man took their positions on the upper floor of the warehouse, near a window so they could see what was going on. Jotaro held his breath in anticipation as he surveyed the field. He remembered the lookout was stationed a long way out, so it could be a while before he actually saw anything. His heart pounded. This reminded him of his days in Egypt, when he'd been on the constant lookout for enemy stand users. He felt a rush of adrenaline pumping through his veins. Those terrifying, never-ending days had returned. He sucked in a deep breath, trying to prepare himself for the fight ahead.
Nervous?
The old man whispered.
No.
Good.
They waited. The seconds passing felt like eternity. A thought crossed his mind.
The seconds.
If it came down to it, could he really do that again? Use the ability he'd only used once in his fight with Dio, and never wanted to use again?
If I have to, I might have to stop time again.
That ghastly ability he shared with Dio. Granted to him by the nature of his stand being similar to the world. It had narrowly saved his life in that fight. It was the same ability that had killed Kakyoin and almost killed Polnareff. But now, if he had to use it to save himself or the old man, he might not have a choice. He pressed his face against the wall and inched forward, only letting the corner of his vision see out the window. He saw a figure approaching in the field, walking towards them at a brisk pace. The vampire. He was too far away to make out any details, but Jotaro could see it was a man, dressed in a long trench coat and boots, his face covered by a hat.
It's him.
Joseph breathed. Neither of them moved a muscle as they watched the vampire approach. The plan was to wait for him to enter the warehouse. That was when they would attack and lock the doors. But with their enemy so close, Jotaro found the wait agonizing. He glanced out the window again. His stomach dropped at what he saw.
Old man, he stopped walking.
Joseph looked out the window as well. He swore under his breath as he confirmed what Jotaro had said. The vampire stood frozen by the storage sheds, not moving. Something was very wrong. Kakyoin didn't have to look in the warehouse to know that. He had seen the building from a distance, thinking it the perfect place to hide from the sun. But now that he was close, there was something that thoroughly disturbed him. The building looked like it had been abandoned for years, yet it reeked with the stench of humans. Not just one, but dozens. Fresh ones, too. He began to panic. This building was the only one nearby. He wouldn't make it to another hiding spot before the sun rose fully. He stood, listening. He couldn't hear anything. Maybe he had imagined the smell? Then against the silence, he heard the faintest noise, barely over the breeze. The sound of a gun being shifted, aimed his way. Kakyoin bolted, and the first rays of sunlight began to creep over the horizon. He had only a few minutes to disappear, because if they didn't catch him, the sun would. The air exploded with the sound of gunshots and men shouting. The vampire was bolting off into the woods, trying to escape. Jotaro's breath hitched, his muscles locked for a fraction of a second. No. How did he know? He should have walked right into the trap. He was supposed to be desperate, running for shelter, so why? Whatever the reason, he couldn't just stand here. They couldn't let him escape. The Speedwagon Foundation soldiers shouted orders to one another. Some of them raced to take positions on the roof, ready to fire. Others went outside and mounted ATVs they parked in the storage sheds. Their engines roared to life and sped off into the field, still chasing the vampire.
That's my ticket.
Before he could think of anything else, he bolted and jumped out of the broken window in front of him.
Jotaro!
The old man called after him, but his cries became lost as he got closer to the ground. Star Platinum caught the edge of a jutting brick, breaking his fall centimeters from the ground. He dropped onto his feet and dashed towards the nearest storage shed where he knew another ATV was stashed. His stand ripped the door off its hinges and he got on, revving the engine to life. He sped off into the field, doing his best to keep the ATV steady with just one hand. The cold, sharp morning wind blew into his face, his eyes stinging. His bad arm was throbbing from pain as it was jostled from all the action, but he had no time to think about that. He could nurse his wounds later. He had to catch this vampire now, before he disappeared again and was gone for good. He made it out onto the grass. He saw the vampire running from afar, his trench coat trailing behind him.
That's strange. Why is he running away? Why isn't he trying to attack at all?
Could his stand's trigger be related to him running away? Whatever the reason, Jotaro figured he'd probably be safer if he didn't get too close. He twisted the accelerator, inching nearer to his target. Suddenly a gunshot sounded near him, and the vampire fell to the ground. Jotaro turned to see that one of the soldiers on a nearby ATV had stopped and taken aim. Jotaro slowed to a stop as well, about 20 meters away from where their enemy had fallen, waiting to see what would happen. He knew the vampire wasn't dead. Due to their immortality and regenerative powers, bullets could only damage vampires, not kill them. Despite knowing that, it was still very unnerving to see the vampire slowly get back up after being shot. He didn't stand all the way up, though. He stayed hunched close to the ground, like he was nursing his gunshot wound.
Stay down!
The soldiers started coming in, surrounding their target.
Put your hands in the air!
Jotaro expected him to keep running, but instead he obeyed and lifted his hands up. He noticed the vampire started extending his right hand slightly towards the trees. Jotaro narrowed his eyes to see what he would do. In an instant, a long, shiny green rope shot out of the vampire's sleeve towards the trees. He wrapped his wrist around the rope and then started pulling him through the air over the men's heads. The soldiers started panicking and firing again, but the vampire was moving too fast to get a clear shot on. No one's aim or gaze was on the rope.
The rope. That has to be a stand. They can't see it!
Jotaro knew he had to act fast before the vampire made it to the trees. He'd be nearly impossible to find once he was in the woods. He got off and rummaged through the storage tank under the driver's seat on the ATV. There were weapons and other survival supplies stashed down there. Jotaro found what he was looking for, a large hunting knife. He summoned Star Platinum, handing the knife to his stand. Star Platinum took aim. His stand was fast and precise enough to catch a moving bullet. He should be able to make this shot. In the blink of an eye, Star Platinum hurled the knife. It sped out of sight like a jet plane, flying straight and true to Jotaro's target, across the field, over the soldiers' heads. The vampire landed in the topmost branch of a tall tree he had been aiming for. The moment his feet landed, the knife sliced through the air, spinning like a deadly blur. In a fraction of a second, impact. The vampire's body jolted. Even from here, Jotaro could hear the vampire's gargled cries cut short as blood filled his throat, crimson splattering on the tree bark behind him. His fingers twitched as he tried to clutch at the knife buried deep in his neck. He lost his balance and fell towards the forest floor. Jotaro saw him try to use his rope again to catch himself, but his stand clearly wasn't fast enough to manage a maneuver like that. The rope shot out just as he landed, head first, on the ground. Jotaro didn't need Star Platinum's enhanced hearing to hear the loud snap of the vampire's neck, even from this distance. He didn't get up again. The men stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what they had just seen.
Don't just stand there! He's going to regenerate soon! Bring him to the warehouse! Quickly, before the sun rises!
The soldiers quickly gathered themselves together and headed off into the woods to follow Jotaro's orders. Jotaro moved to follow them when he heard a familiar cry from behind.
Jotaro! Wait up!
It was the old man.
What were you thinking just running off like that?
His grandfather was running up to him, having finally caught up from the warehouse.
Relax, old man.
Jotaro grunted as he approached.
I got it taken care of.
Where's the vampire?
Jotaro nodded to where the Speedwagon Foundation soldiers were retrieving the vampire. They carried him in a net between about 8 soldiers, a few more standing ready with guns in case the vampire attacked. But even though Jotaro still couldn't make out his face with the mass of soldiers, he could see the vampire wasn't moving.
Well, good work then. Let's head back to the warehouse.
Hop on.
Jotaro got back on the ATV and motioned for the old man to do the same.
Thanks.
Once Joseph was seated behind Jotaro, he revved the engine to life and started trailing behind the soldiers. They made it back to the storage shed, the sun beginning to peek its head over the horizon. Jotaro took a deep breath and got off the ATV and headed into the warehouse to finish the trap setup. Soon, they could finally question the vampire and get his answers. Kakuin had never experienced such a roller coaster of emotions, not since he had first emerged from his grave. When he had been running from what he assumed to be the police, he hadn't felt very threatened, more confused on how they had been able to lay a trap like that for him. But he didn't want to hurt them, so he fled. He was more worried about finding a place to hide from the sun, though. Then the gunshot rang out, a bullet piercing, ripping through his heart. A burning pain exploded in his chest. Sharp, searing, unlike anything he had ever felt before. His vision blurred, his body gave out. He hit the ground hard, choking on his own blood. He drew in a shaky, staggering breath as his chest leaked blood. His head spun, vision faded. The explosive pain was enough to make him wish he was dead. But no such release had come. Instead, a new sensation crawled over his wound. His chest regenerated, the wound sealing itself closed. His newly formed heart hammering against his ribs as if nothing had happened. When he could breathe again, he touched his chest in bewilderment, finding it completely healed. Terrible, paralyzing fear engulfed him.
I should be dead. But I'm not.
It was all he had time to think before his attackers had surrounded him, demanding he cooperate. The reinforcements were approaching on ATVs. But Kakuin wasn't afraid anymore. The feeling had dissipated, replaced by exhilaration.
This is what immortality is.
They had shot him. Fatally wounded him. Anyone else would have keeled over. Dead. But he was still alive. He was truly immortal. No human could kill him. These men were a nuisance. Nothing more. He grinned, his stand's energy thrumming in his fingertips. The only reason he didn't immediately kill them then and there was that he knew that he would only draw more attention to himself and further hinder his quest to find Jotaro. A massacre right outside of Tokyo wouldn't be easily missed. So when they shouted at him to put his hands in the air, he pretended to comply, intending to use Hierophant to escape. He pulled himself through the air toward the treetop that he'd latched Hierophant to. As the men below him shouted, the air once more ripped with the sound of gunfire, but he felt euphoric. Nothing, no one could stop him now. He landed in the tree, intending to keep using Hierophant to go further and further into the woods. He could outrun them forever if he needed to. He heard a faint whizzing sound, and suddenly something impaled itself in his neck. A stab of pain seemed to shoot through his entire being. That was the only noise he could make as blood filled his throat. He coughed it up violently, but more quickly replaced it, his tissues tearing as he did. His eyes teared up from pain, his euphoria completely forgotten. He didn't have time to think about the pain, though. His feet slipped as momentum from the object in his neck caught him off guard. Hierophant's coil loosened and he plummeted, about 10 meters, down to the forest floor. Frantically, he tried to lash his coil around something else to stop the fall, but it was too late, and his stand wasn't fast enough. He landed headfirst. Everything was silent for a moment, save the ringing in his ears. He was frozen, unable to move a single finger. All the breath had been knocked out of him.
I must have broken my neck.
His scrambling thoughts came together to form that one rational statement. Then the pain came. A pounding pain in his skull, like hammer smashing a nail in, cracking his head wide open. The rest of his body was completely numb. He tried to move, but his body and head were completely disconnected, laying still in an uncomfortable position. His terror returned, his heart pounding wildly. He wanted to scream, it hurt so bad, but he couldn't even open his mouth.
Come on! Heal!
But nerve damage apparently took a lot longer to heal, because his body stayed like that for several moments, painful and unable to move. He heard the distant sound of shouting and people coming towards him.
No! No!
He willed his body to move, but it stayed immobilized.
Please!
He prayed to whoever could hear him.
Don't come near me! Let me go!
The men in pursuit surrounded him, their guns trained on his position. Kakuin could only move his eyes to look at them, filling his gaze with as much hate as he could muster, trying to hide his fear.
You heard him. Bring him back to the warehouse.
The warehouse?
Why were they bringing him back there? Why not just kill him now? The sunlight was gradually increasing. They could just wait a few more minutes and he turned to dust. The men threw a net over him, like one used for hunting. They repositioned his body with their rough hands to get him inside it. Once he was thoroughly tangled in it, the end was knotted to cut off any escape. Then they grabbed him and started hoisting the net up to carry him. All he could do was let it happen, the object in his neck stabbing uncomfortably by every movement. As they shifted his weight around, he caught a glance of the logo on one of their uniforms, blazoned on his lapel. A red circle with spokes, outlined by a larger red circle like a bicycle tire. Surrounding it were yellow English letters that took him a moment to decipher. Speedwagon. His heartbeat spiked, realization crashing down on him like a waterfall. These men weren't police or even the military. They were from the Speedwagon Foundation, the organization that had helped them on their journey to Egypt by providing them with travel supplies and information. Their medical staff had taken care of Jotaro's mother, Holly, while they were away.
What in the world are they doing here?
His question remained unanswered as the men dragged his limp form across the field in the net, his body becoming battered. He heard the distant roaring of ATVs and guns being carried. Kakyoin was racking his brain, trying to remember any details he could about the Foundation. Things he could remember Jotaro or Mr. Joestar talking about.
The Speedwagon Foundation is indebted to the Joestar family. They can help them with almost anything.
A thought came to him, a thought that almost made him giddy.
Could Jotaro or Mr. Joestar be here? Did they orchestrate this?
His eyes widened. He jerked his body as a little feeling had started returning to it. He was trying to call out, but the object lodged in his throat stopped him from speaking, resulting in him coughing and choking on more blood. The men carrying him panicked and stopped dragging him, but the one who seemed to be the commander shouted at them.
Keep your grip on him! You, stay down!
He aimed his rifle. The barrel exploded and shot Kakyoin in the neck, point blank. It was indescribable agony. Kakyoin could feel that part of his neck had been blown off, and now blood and viscera were splattered down his body and on the men around him. He would have screamed if his body wasn't still paralyzed. Tears blurred his vision. He wanted so badly to die in that moment. The explosive, burning torture corrupting every cell in his upper body. His mind started to go blank, his vampire instinct starting to take over.
No! I have to find him! Jotaro!
It was all he could think.
This is what immortality is.
It came with tremendous power and terrifying strength, but also the worst pain imaginable. The last time he had felt this much pain was when he had seen his parents mourning over him. Sorrow, pain, and heartache that the average person would never feel. Indescribably lonely. A feeling he was all too familiar with. He was only vaguely aware of the men carrying him closer to the warehouse. He hardly cared. Nothing they did to him could be more painful than this. Through his haze, he could see the sky turning brighter and brighter. The sun had to be over the horizon now. Even if he could move, he couldn't run away. Fortunately, flesh wounds healed much faster than nerve damage. His excruciating neck wound began to seal itself close and heal. He was able to breathe again as he was brought into the warehouse, and heard the door close with a deafening bang.
Jotaro heard the sound of the rifle exploding, but before he could investigate, the old man had called him over to help set up the lights. He didn't hear any further disturbance and decided that the soldiers must have gotten a handle on the situation.
We're ready.
Joseph called.
Bring the vampire in.
The shuffle of men brought the vampire's body in. Jotaro came up from behind.
Bring him to the center,
Jotaro ordered. The commander nodded to his men. They dragged the vampire between them and then threw him, face down, into the center of the warehouse floor, about 10 meters away from where Jotaro and the old man stood.
Untie the net, remove a knife, and turn the lights on,
Jotaro called to them. The soldiers obeyed, undoing the knot in the bottom of the net. They reached in, jerking out the hunting knife that Star Platinum had thrown in before with an unflattering squelching sound. One of them said something into a walkie-talkie, and then they dispersed, leaving the vampire alone on the floor. His limp form lay curled, entangled in the net. The men on the second-floor catwalks shut the windows, and for a few moments the warehouse was in complete darkness. Jotaro could only hear the sound of his own heartbeat and breathing. The UV lights they had stationed from above turned on, bathing the surroundings in the purplish-blue light. They circled around about 3 meters away from the vampire, leaving him in a small circle in which the light wasn't touching him. The idea of the trap was to make him unable to run away and be forced to talk. Above and on the ground, every soldier had their gun trained on the unmoving body below.
I think we're ready.
I agree.
Jotaro grunted. This was it. The moment they had prepared for so long was finally at hand. Once that vampire regenerated and stood to face them, they could get some answers. Jotaro and Joseph walked up to the UV light circle until they were close enough to touch it.
You!
Joseph made his voice as commanding as he could.
Bet you thought you were real clever sneaking up on us, huh? Well, the joke's on you! That little trail of corpses you left behind from Morio to S-City let us predict where you'd strike next.
Once you've regenerated,
Jotaro cut in.
stand up, turn around, and don't try anything funny. You're surrounded by UV lights and soldiers on every side. We're going to ask you some questions.
The vampire began to stir. After a few moments, he put his hands on the ground and started to push his way out of the net. He slowly stood up, his movements shaky and unsure. Once he was up, he stared at the wall. He made no attempt to turn around, seemingly hesitating.
Turn around! Now!
The vampire stiffened, but then relaxed, regaining his composure. Then he spoke.
All right.
That was all he said, in a voice barely above a murmur. But it was enough to make every hair on Jotaro's body stand on end. He knew that voice. The vampire turned to face them. Jotaro only stared in shocked silence. Joseph gasped loudly.
Oh my god!
Standing before them was Noriaki Kakuin, his face tinted blue from the UV light, the friend whose funeral they had attended only a few weeks before. They said nothing for a few moments, the three men only staring at each other. Then Kakuin smiled. A warm, genuine smile, just like the ones he had given before. His indigo eyes shone, like this was the happiest he'd been in years. He started talking again, his voice soft-spoken, yet confident. Exactly how Jotaro remembered.
Jotaro. Mr. Joestar. It's so good to see you again.